Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Heck is Going On in Coffee. My name is Igor Bagrado. I'm a coffee and sugar analyst here at Coffee Trading Academy. I'm with our chief analyst, Ryan Delaney, today.
Hey, everybody.
So it's been a while since we did our last What the Heck podcast.
Yeah,
So
sure
a few
has.
things have happened in the market since then.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's take a look at those things. So for those of you who are seeing this on YouTube, you'll be able to see our 2-year Arabica coffee chart here.
Mm.
So it's been an interesting year so far in coffee. We ended 23 with a big rally, and we started 24 with the market range bound inside the 180, 190 cents price range. And then all of a sudden the market rallied all the way up to 230, 250 cents. But the market didn't stay in that range for too long because right after that, we saw this big sell-off back to the 190 cents. But then again, most recently, the market rallied all the way up to 230, 240, which is currently the range we're at.
Right.
So with all of these ups and downs in the market, I think that leads us to that question that we always have in this podcast, which is what the heck is going on in coffee, right?
That's right. Yeah, what the heck indeed, Igor. A lot of things going on since our last podcast. And I think it was in October, our last podcast, on this very subject of trying to figure out what the heck is going on in coffee. So I think we can break down the price action here into uh, three distinct uh, categories or subjects, maybe we could say. So first, we had that rally that you mentioned, all the way from 140 all the way up to 200 here. So prior to that, we were in a real bear market, but the irony of that bear market was that we had certs drawing down. And so it was a bit unusual because low certified inventory, drawing certified inventory, that's the key supply for the futures market. So the irony of this bear market here was that the certs were decreasing. Now that really came to a head, that came to near crisis levels when we got to this 200,000 bags low, or 230,000 bags low. That was like a 23-year low for certified inventory. That was an incredibly bullish situation here. And that is when we had this rally. The market decided that it was undervalued back up to around 200 cents. That made quite a bit more sense. And at that time, also, we had also been experiencing this inversion for quite some time as well. And that's quite unusual in the big picture with the coffee market. But that inversion started a while ago, and that has been very persistent, and that has stuck around until just recently. And we'll get to that in a minute here. So we had these very low certs. The market decided it was undervalued, and that rallied us back up to about 200 cents here. Then we saw that paradigm change. We started to finally see new certified inventory coming back in. So those certs started to rise in Arabica and Robusta. And this alleviated a lot of that bullish pressure that we had been experiencing. So the market was kind of bouncing around in that range here. And that's when a new problem reared its ugly head, and that was the drought and dryness and heat in Vietnam. Now, Vietnam, of course, is the second largest producer of coffee and the largest producer of Robusta coffee in the world. So this is very significant, especially for the Robusta market, but really for both markets, because the Robusta market has eaten away a lot of the Arabica demand over the last couple of years. So this is key to the total coffee picture, the total coffee balance sheet. And so that was a real wake-up call for the market. Now, then, even though that still is relevant and that's still something that is a concern, that faced some competing interest, we can say, from other fundamental factors. Now, notably, these certs have continued to rally. They've continued to rise. So we went from 230,000 bags to 500,000 bags, and now we're closer to 800,000 bags of coffee. So this is, more than a tripling of the total certified inventory, and it's getting darn close to that million bag threshold where the market generally was feeling relatively comfortable for certified inventory. We also saw very strong exports out of Brazil, supplying new coffee to the market, filling in a lot of the demand, a lot of the needs. So all of these things served as a bearish counterweight to the Vietnam drought. And so that knocked the market back down. And now finally, we have our third factor here, which is now that the Brazil crop is in full swing, now that that is being harvested and that crop is being analyzed, we've seen this new phenomenon, this new concern, which is the Brazil bean size, right? We've seen smaller bean sizes than expected, and in particular, much smaller or much lower percentages of the large beans. A screen 1718 is a large coffee bean in Brazil and in general, and we're seeing much less of those than we would have expected in a normal healthy crop. So these are our three factors that we're really focusing on for this particular podcast, and that the market is concerned with and has been dealing with and digesting over these last several months here. So we're going to cover each of these in detail, but I think the certs is most important to mention first, not only for the overall health of the coffee market, but also for calendar spreads, right? That's something we talk about a lot, is the difference between futures months, which we call calendar spreads, which has numerous implications. One of which is it affects the expense of hedgers, of commercials to hold coffee, either in origin or destination. Any hedged coffee has an expense now because of the inversion that was normally a discount. That used to be a way of diminishing expenses. And also because it can generally reflect the overall fundamentals. So when we have very firm, expensive calendar spreads, that reflects a situation of tightness and bullishness. And when we have a calendar spreads back in contango or carry, then that generally reflects looseness or ease in the market here. So here we can see in the long-term chart of the certified inventory, that dramatic drawdown from the healthy, comfortable range of 1 million to 2 million bags, all the way down to 230,000 bags at the end of last year. And then that rather impressive rise. So we can see here in the last 6 months, we've just seen a steady buildup and rise in certified inventory. So that was a major factor in bringing down the market in general, and also in diminishing these calendar spreads. So if you can see on your screen here, for those of you listening in the podcast, what we're looking at is the KC spread curve. And this is from a report that we send out in our premium reports to our clients. But you can see that the front month, that July SEP, briefly went back into contango. It went back into carry from an inversion, and this has been persistently inverted for a long time. And the driving factor for that reduction has been this increase in certified inventory, and not only the actual absolute level, but the trajectory and the direction, right? Now, these back months here, the SEP deck, the deck March, those are still holding in their inversion. They're still relatively firm. Longer term, we would have to expect those to come down if these certs continue to rise. But ultimately, these are going to reflect that supply of coffee, and that's going to be determined by differentials. So the price of our physical coffees are going to determine whether or not it makes sense to tender your coffees and submit them to the exchange for grading. If they're too expensive, then the market is going to say, let's just sell them on the open market here, right? Your exporter is going to sell them on the open market. You're not going to have much interest in tendering them. But if they get cheap enough, on a differential basis, then they're going to be submitted to be graded and incorporated into the certified inventory. And you can see here with our yellow line here, this is the Brazil diffs. And if you're not able to see it on the podcast, then what you can see on the YouTube video is that we had a period here at the end of last year where Brazilian diffs got very, very cheap. And that was a large instigating factor for generating some of the initial impetus of new certs. And we flirted with cheaper diffs throughout the latter part of this year, or rather the latter part of the most recent few weeks here. Now, that's Arabica certs. We also have Robusta certs, and we have a very similar situation in that market, right, Igor? We've got inverted spreads in Robusta, and that has been driven by also 5-year lows in Robusta certified inventory. So on our 5-year chart here, you can see that we are really way below the average, way below the comfortable range of maybe 80 to 160,000 metric tons of certified inventory. But much like Arabica, we have seen an improvement in Robusta certs. So Robusta certs have increased quite possibly through strong exports out of Brazil. Now, what Igor is going to chat with us about here in a second is Vietnam. And the reason why we are less optimistic about Robusta than we are with Arabica is because of Vietnam, right, Igor? The situation in Vietnam has some concerns. So that's something that we are gonna look at here in a second. But we did want to mention that we have some exciting news here. We have a joint venture with our good friends in Vietnam, Artist Trading, that's run by Alex Gruber, well-known guy in the coffee industry. We've put together a Vietnam crop report. Alex just finished actually touring the country just now with his team. They've done a detailed analysis and crop survey of all of the production regions in Vietnam. And this detailed report is going to be available very soon. So if that's something that you're interested, if you're very serious about the coffee market, if you are a coffee trader or roaster and the Vietnamese coffee market is important to you, this is a must-have. This is only for a select few clients. So reach out to us at info@coffeetradingacademy.com if you're interested in that. Okay, so again, that's info@coffeetradingacademy.com. So do please reach out to us if you're interested in checking out this report. Now, Igor, what's going on in Vietnam? What the heck is going on with that market, and why are we so concerned there?
All right, so let's start by talking Vietnam diffs here. So for those of you here seeing this on YouTube, you can see a pretty significant rise in Vietnam diffs this year. So the year started with a certain aspect of normality. Diffs were actually declining in the very start of the year, but all of that changed when diffs started rallying up to the higher end of the historical range at $200-300 above the market. But then it didn't stop there. Diffs actually kept rallying month by month. And what's curious about it is that the futures market was also rallying. Normally, when the futures market rallies, that enables sellers, for example, to demand less of a premium in their coffees, and then they're able to reduce the diffs. So normally, the futures and the diffs, they share an inverse relationship, typically. But that's not what we saw. Instead, what we saw here is Robusta futures rallying and Vietnam diffs rallying concurrently. Now, that's pretty notorious because that's 20-year highs of diffs. Here in this chart is a seasonal chart. You can see the last 5 years. But if we expand this to the last 15, 20 years, those would still be record levels. So just for context, right now, the Vietnam coffees are trading $800 above futures. And normally on a 5-year average, this number should be closer to 150. So we are 430% above average. Now, if you go back to the next slide, Ryan, we will be able to see the Vietnam exports.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add here is that this is typical of a strong bull market, is when we see strong diffs combined with strong futures. Because of course, Vietnam is the largest producer of Robusta in the world. So when Vietnam has a problem, their differentials are going to increase. Also, the futures market is going to increase.
Yeah, that's what people would call a real bull market, right?
Right.
When there's a sign that that's real coffee scarcity. So when we combine this information with what we can see and access to Vietnam exports, then that makes more sense, because you see here in this chart that looks like Vietnam has exported as much as it could in the start of the year. So December, January, and February, those months, all of those months, they exported more than average. So for example, in January, they exported more than 1 million bags above average. Now exports are collapsing, which could be indicative that indeed supply is low. There's not much supply available. So in May, they only exported 1.5 million bags compared to an average of 2.5 million bags. That's 1 million bags less. And based on the projection that we have for this month of June, that will be another 1 million bags below average, making 2 million bags below average in 2 months. So it looks like exports are now starting to confirm the supply scarcity implied by the diffs. And not only that, those exports are reflecting the 23-24 crop, the one that was harvested in October. But not only we have this problem, but we also have a problem with the 24-25 crop, the one that's going to be harvested in October, in just a few months.
Right. So, and I just wanted to add to that, Igor, that we talked earlier in this presentation about the strong demand for Robusta, right? And even with the bear market of last year, the coffee prices, the Arabica prices, are still historically very high. For a lot of my career, the price of coffee was between 100 cents and 140 cents. And really, in the last year and a half, 140 cents has been the low, and it's only very briefly been there. Other than that, it's been largely above the 200-cent mark, which is historically very expensive. And so the industry at large has been shifting their consumption to Robusta. And Vietnam is the workhorse of the Robusta world. So we saw strong demand for Vietnamese coffees, strong demand for Robusta coffees, and the Vietnamese were only too happy to oblige. They shipped all of their coffee in 22, 23 out. They had strong exports to meet that demand. And then again in 23, 24, the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we had very strong exports because prices were so good, because prices were so high. And so now what we believe happened, and what Igor was just talking about here, what you were just mentioning, is we're seeing those exports slow down, which exactly as you said, Igor, I think does confirm that potentially there is less supply out of this country now.
Exactly. And the situation looks worse when we look at what happened with Vietnam weather over the past 2 months. Right. So this image that you're seeing here those are the weather maps that we provided to our clients in April 23rd. So back then we were looking at the weather forecast, and we started seeing that April and May, the rainfall forecast, they were dry. But that's untypical because usually that's when the rainfall season is supposed to happen in Vietnam, and that's crucial for the development of the next crop. So we started advising on that potential risk. At first, it didn't seem like a big risk because it was the further out maps, which are less reliable. But then when it started coming closer, then those forecasts started to materialize. And not only the dryness materialized, but also heat, which exacerbated the stress on the plants. So even though Robusta, by how its name says, it's robust, uh, that did had an effect on the plants, which we are now assessing through our crop survey, for example, that Ryan had just mentioned. So we had that period of dryness and heat and plant stress, but it's only now that we are able to assess the damage on the plants and try to come up with the forecast on how this can impact the next crop. So what we're looking here is a potentially another impact in the Vietnam crop. And even though Vietnam is the major Robusta producer, this not only addresses Vietnam, but it's also the entirety of the coffee market.
Right.
Because Vietnam is such a big producer, it produces such a big amount of coffee annually that it changes the dynamics when we look at total coffee available, total supply, right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to just point out here that we actually, as you kind of alluded to, this is from some of our premium reports, but we were talking about this back in January and February, because we could see the dryness coming in our long-term, long-range charts. Now, as you said, Igor, when you start looking at 3 months out, 2 months out, 4 months out, those forecasts are not super reliable. So we weren't concerned immediately, although this was on our radar. But it did end up taking place. And as we got closer to that period, we started to see like, okay, this is going from being possible to quite possible to very possible to very likely, right? And that's kind of the transition that we saw. So we were able to give early warning on this to our clients, but early warning is also, the counter side to early warning is that it's less certain warning, right? And that certainty increased as we got forward in time. But that is, as you said here, this is why that crop survey that we're offering with our partner artists through this Elite Insights Vietnam Coffee Crop Report. That's why this is so important right now, because that is going to be a survey that reflects the damage that was done from all of this dryness. Okay, now, as you said, Igor, Vietnam doesn't just impact the Robusta market, it also impacts the overall coffee market in general, right? And the total supply of coffee. And the other workhorse, the other giant origin of the coffee world is, of course, your homeland here, Brazil. So Brazil has had a decent crop last year, the 23-24 crop. And with those high prices that we talked about, they were shipping lots of coffee. We were getting very good exports out of Brazil. And indeed, even this year, as we got through the first half of the year, January through June, or January through May, I should say, we had very strong exports out of Brazil. For those of you listening, what we can see on the screen here is our exports, our Sea Cafe exports out of Brazil. And you can see that we are well above average and even well above all previous years for 4 out of the 5 first months of the year. Now, looking into June, that is expected to come off a bit. We're going to have a little bit less exports in June, but still above average. It's kind of normal for the year to see a little bit of a decline at this point. But what we are concerned about is this issue of bean size. And this is a very new development over just the last few weeks here, that has become a concern. So looking at the chart here, what we can see is this is something we've compiled of all of the production forecasts out there in the market from different trade houses, brokerages, government agencies, non-government agencies. These are all of our Brazil forecasts here. And you can see that the 24-25 average is significantly higher than last year, right? So last year, that 23-24 crop, that was a good harvest. It was a decent sized crop. But this 24-25 crop is going to be significantly better. And the market at large, the world is looking for this supply of Brazilian coffee to alleviate and address all the supply shortages we've had in the last few years. Now, even with the reductions, this is still looking like a very solid crop. But the concern now is that because of this bean size reduction, that the overall supply of Brazilian coffee is going to be less, right? So if you think about coffee beans as being in percentages by size, so we might say, okay, normally 20% of our total volume of coffee is coming from these screen 17, 18 size large coffee beans, and maybe 5% is going to be pea berries or very small, and then X% all of the grades in between. Okay. Now, instead of that 20%, maybe there's 15% or 10%. And so that has the effect of actually reducing the overall volume of coffee. So we are seeing reductions in that 24-25 Brazil crop forecast. And so that is one of the big concerns that we're seeing. It's only June now, so the harvest is not over. And often we'll see worse bean size and quality in the beginning of the harvest versus the middle of the harvest. So it's quite likely that those bean size issues are improving, but that is the big issue right now. We actually have a Brazil crop survey in progress now as well. That's included in our normal premium reports. So for everybody who signs up on our premium reports, you get a daily and weekly price forecast. You get in-depth analysis. You get our full supply and demand balance sheet. And you also get weekly market videos. So like this, but shorter and more market focused with price forecasts. So that is available now. You can get the link in the description, either for our premium reports in general, or for our special joint venture on the Vietnam crop forecast. But those are the main issues that we're seeing right now. And in a nutshell, I'd say that's what the heck is going on in coffee. All right, Igor, that's all I've got for this week. So I think we've covered it. Did you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's pretty much the coffee market in a nutshell. That's an overview of what's been happening, and I hope that that has offered a good insight into what's happening to our listeners here.
Excellent. So hopefully you all will join us next time when we see what crazy things the coffee market is doing, and we ask that question again: what the heck is going on in coffee?